So, thank you very much. I have to decide on the setup. So I have a PowerPoint presentation, but I have two screens in front of me, and so I have to make sure that what you see is what you should see. And, so let me try to share, hoping I share the proper thing.
We can see everything. Yeah.
So you can see?
Yes.
Yes, that was.
So now the dilemma is, should I face you or should I face the screen? Because the small screen is in front of the camera and the big screen has the presentation. So I will not watch.
So long as we hear you, we're fine.
Very good. Thank you, Sukanya. So let me just say a few words about Alexander and our long relationship. I first met with Alexander in the early 90s in Toulouse at a conference for modern South Asian studies. And so I had gone there because Animoto was organizing a panel, and Alexander happened to be there. He was in another panel, but since he was interested in Tamil, I was in a linguistics panel. He was here for some other reason, but we had Tamil in common, and we also had Russian in common because before studying Tamil, I studied Russian. And so we had many subjects for exchange. And after that, we struck up a friendship which lasted for many years and which still exists in my mind. And I'm sure in his way also at the moment. And so this has been a relationship based on some constant translation between languages. And so yes, so I have control now. I'll try to move from one slide. Since we were constantly navigating between languages, I've chosen a topic which has to do with the difficulty of communicating between zones. And so at the center of attention, we have something which is called the Tamiḻ Aṇiyiyal, and which has been at the center of the attention of many theoreticians in Tamil Nadu. So we have a Tamiḻ Aṇiyiyal in which many poems are produced, such as the one which Eva has shown us. And there are people who learn how to make these poems. So there are poets, there are would-be poets, and there are teachers who teach those would-be poets or those would-be Pulavar. And so the text we are going to examine today have to do with learning how to become a Tamil Pulavar, how to become a Tamil teacher, how to become a Tamil poet, etc. And of course, the difficulty is that we are going to talk about them in English, and we are going to talk about them in English, examining the effort of people before us who are using other languages, such as German, French, Latin, Portuguese. And each time they were trying to get closer to something, but they were not necessarily going closer. So I'm exploring something which lies between finding the truth, adding complex layers, or simplifying. It will be for you to judge. So the starting point in this exploration is taken from an entry in a dictionary made by somebody called Beschi. So Beschi, as you can see here, was born in 1680 and died in 1747. And Beschi compiled many texts. Well, he composed poetry himself, Tamiڵ. He composed grammars, several grammars, and he also composed a dictionary, an agaradi, that we might also want to call Inigandu. And his agaradi is known as the Satur agaradi, which means fourfold agaradi. And it contains 4 sections: the Payer agaradi, the Porul agaradi, the Togay agaradi, and finally the Todei agaradi. It would be a dictionary of nouns, a dictionary of things, a dictionary of numbers or groups, and a dictionary of rhyme. That would be the second syllable rhymes. And the entry we are examining is the entry Aṇiyiyal. But since it will more clearly show the context for you, I have also included the preceding entry, which is Aran, which means fortification, and the following entry, which is Avattei, from Sanskrit Avasta. And this is from maybe the first printed edition in the 19th century, and there is a copy in the FAO. So if we try to transliterate the text, partly at least, you can see the headword in green. So here are 3 headwords. Of course, in this section, there are many, many more headwords. So the headword Aran, the headword Aṇiyiyal, the headword Avattei. And so Beschi provided this information. And so the headword Aran is followed by a number, which is number 4, here in yellow. The headword Aṇiyiyal is followed by number 35, here in yellow also. And number Avattei is followed by number 5. And after the number, we have a list, which I've reproduced partly or in totality. So for Aran, it's in totality. Malay, Kare, Madil, Kadal. For Aṇiyiyal, I give only a beginning. And we're going to see the whole list, but it would not be possible to do justice to the whole list in such a short presentation. You can see it starts with Tamiḻ, which could mean nature, followed by Uvamei, which is simile, Sanskrit upama, what the poetical use of a comparison. Then Uruvagam, which is the Tamil form of Rupaka, so it's another rhetorical figure, etc. So how to get a grip on what this means? So the easiest way to understand at least a small part of it is to follow the historical track. Beschi lived in the 18th century, but he had a huge influence on the scholars who lived in the 19th century and who started to adapt into English many of the things which had been first explored by Beschi. Of course, Beschi himself was not the first. In the 17th and the 16th century, there had been other scholars who had done a tremendous work. But Beschi somehow may have been one of the first to fully explore a realm of poetical literature. So he may have been the first foreign Pulavar. And so in the 19th century, one of the first dictionary which was printed, well, there were other dictionaries in English printed before, but an important one is the dictionary by Rottler. And Rottler is very much indebted to Beschi. And you can see in the entry Aran in Rottler, an explanation. They reckon 4 kinds of forts. That is Malay Aran, a fort depending on a mountain, Magil Aran, fort depending on a wall, etc. And so this would correspond to the entry Aran, which we have seen in the Taṇṭiyalaṅkāram. What about Taṇṭiyalaṅkāram? Rottler explains, they enumerate 35 rhetorical or poetical figures, namely Tanmei, Uvamei, Uruvagam, Tivakam, so Tivagam would be Dipaka, etc. And you can see that Rottler does not translate these things, and he gives a reference to the Taṇṭiyalaṅkāram, saying that it has been composed by a poet, Dandi. And we also have earlier in the entry by Rottler a reference to a dictionary by Wilson, a Sanskrit dictionary, 19th century, and which somehow may be an anachronistic reference because Rottler is following Beschi, but is giving some explanation which are based on some ongoing exploration of the Sanskrit language. So, so he may be slightly modifying the object which he presents. And here we don't really have time, but I'm just showing it for the sake of completude. You can see the entry Avatei or Avasta in Rottler. And if you can read very fast, you will have read what is on the screen, but I'm moving forward. And now Rottler slightly enlarged, but maybe if this is recorded, people can have a look at this. But since it is not translated, maybe people would prefer to have a look at one of the successors of Rottler, which is called Winslow. So Winslow composed a dictionary and or compiled a dictionary. Nobody composes a dictionary. Maybe the very first compiler of a dictionary composes a dictionary, and people who follow try to improve, and they compile and compile and compile. So here in Winslow, you can see, maybe for the first time in English, English translation for the names of the Alaṅkāram, the 35 Alaṅkāram, and which are listed in Beschi's Taṇṭiyalaṅkāram. And here, something slightly bigger at the beginning of the list, and I'm simply presupposing that this is recorded and somebody would want to read this while it is recorded. And well, I can read just the beginning. Uvamai, a parable, Uruvagam, metaphor, etc. Here the end of a list, which I leave a few seconds for the sake of the recording. But as you see, there is so much matter, one could talk for several days. And now I'm going into the center, my inquiry. So this is part of a larger inquiry. So the question is not what was Beschi showing. The question is what was Beschi hiding. So Beschi was the one who was rewording some knowledge. So he was the interpreter of the Tamiḻ poetical tradition, but was he a faithful interpreter? Was the data provided by Beschi really faithful to what Tamil poets had been using when they were learning their skill? And so my argument is that in fact Beschi was not very faithful. he was reformulating, he was normalizing, he was making himself it's a mouthpiece of a certain group of people, but he was forgetting the point of view of other group of people. And so when Beschi was composing his Sadhulagaradi, he was in fact emulating a class of works which are called in Tamil Nigandus, and sometimes are called Urichol Panuval. And the root of that tradition is found in the Uriyel of the Toľkapiam. And we have a sequence of Nigandus. The oldest one is the Taṇṭiyalaṅkāram. And then the second, most well known is the Pingalam. And then there are many others. There are thousands of pages containing data from Nigandus. But at some point in the 16th century, somebody made a Nigandu which surpassed other Nigandus as a popular work, and it was called the Sudamani Nigandu. And we have information about the use of those Nigandus thanks to Ziegenbalg. So you can see on screen something told by Ziegenbalg, and which has been reproduced in the Biblioteca Malabarica, which was edited by Will Sweetman and Ilakovanar. And so Ziegenbalg tells us that young children in Tamil Nadu would memorize the Divakaram, but it was something specialized for poets, and that ordinary people would not understand the content of such thing. But people who wanted to go for Tamil poetry would study it. And it tells us that there was another Nigandu. So it's the Sudamani Nigandu, but it was simply called Nigandu because it was so popular. And, and they would memorize it. And we have early traces of this. So this is from Provençal Dictionary, where it talks about a thing called Nigandu, and it says it's a vocabulario. And but we don't have much detail, but it was known to Provençal. And then we have a testimony of Uwe Saminadaïr explaining that he has learned the Nigandu when he was a child. And so somewhere in his autobiography, he described the time when he learned first when he was a small child, age 6 or 7, with some teacher in some village. And later when he went to see his famous teacher, Meenakshi Sundaram Pillai, his teacher asked him, have you studied the Nigandu? So he asked, Nigandu Pada Mundo. And then he answers, Panirandu Togudium Pada Mundu. And then he recited. So he knew by heart the Sudamani Nigandu, and that would make, if you recite it, maybe 6 hours of recitation. So it's not a small thing to memorize the Nigandu. And, but as you can see from this exchange, Meenakshi Sundaram Pillai was complaining that people were no longer learning the Nigandu. So now let's see the depth of Beschi with the Nigandu tradition. As I've told you, in the Sadhulagaradi there are 4 parts. But in the Nigandu, the division is slightly different. So what did Beschi do as a modification? So the Peyalagaradi, which comes as first part in the Sadhulagaradi, is in fact a collection of polysemic words. So it tells us which words, which meanings difficult words have. So for instance, the word Ari is a very difficult word. It has maybe 40 meanings. Other words may have 2 or 3 meanings, etc. And this is organized alphabetically. But Beschi was not the first to alphabetize a section of polysemic word, because this was already the case in the Pingalam. And people also attempted to do it for the Divakaram. In the so Then the Polulagaradi imitates the section for synonymy in the Nigandus, but improvement is its alphabetical. And the Togai-Agaradi emulates the 12th section of the Sudamani Nigandu and Tivakaram, but instead of having the numbers in by increasing numbers, starting with 2, going to 3, going to 4, it's alphabetic. So that's the power of alphabetization, alphabetical order. And then Togai-Agaradi is a rhyme dictionary, but I have to accelerate if I want to move in my slides. So I have shown you the entry Aran in the Togai-Agaradi, in the Sadura-Agaradi, and you can see the same entry Aran in the Divakaram. So, of course, the format is not exactly the same, but it's the same content. And here you can see the entry Aran in the Sudamani Nigandu, so that text which Saminadayan knew by heart. And as you can see, the Sudamani Nigandu is in Virutam meter, so they have clubbed together a lot of information. So it may not be so easy to extract that information. It's like a zip file where you compress data, but still, because of its metrical structure, it's a fascinating object. And people who wanted to be Pulava would willingly memorize all that and use it as an atomic weapon. And now let's move to the Aṇiyiyal. You would expect the Sudamani Nigandu to contain 35 Aṇiyiyal, because Beschi has 35 Aṇiyiyal, but that's not what we find. In the Sudamani Nigandu, we have 28 Aṇiyiyal. So how ancient is that situation? You can see on the right side those 28 Aṇiyiyal, and because it's a long list, it's spread on the 3 stanzas of the Sudamani Nigandu. And now let's move to the Divakaram. The Divakaram in this 12th section also has a list of Aṇiyiyal, and it's just like the Sudamani Nigandu. Of course, it's much older, and it's 28 Aṇiyiyal. So it seems that the tradition in Tamil Nadu was not to have 35 Aṇiyiyal, but it was to have 28 Aṇiyiyal. And but Beschi somehow decided that maybe 35 is better. Maybe the way of the Taṇṭiyalaṅkāram is better than the way which is taught in Tamil Nigandus. Maybe Beschi believed in progress. Beschi wanted to improve things. He was followed by 19th century lexicographers. And I could show you the Pingaram, but I've somehow reached the end of the time which I have, but I think I've spoken already for 23 minutes. And I've only touched the tip of the iceberg. Of course, the center of my exploration is to have more precise idea on the history of Alankara Shastra in Tamil Nadu. I'm exploring what is called the Aṇiyiyal. So the Aṇiyiyal is a lost treatise, which is referred to by quotation in the Nigandus. So we have unanimity between the Divakaram, the Pingalam, and the Sudamani Nigandu. But it is also attested in the Yapalangara Virutti. And so the Yapalangara Virutti gives us a list which is almost identical to the list which is found in the Nigandus. And he refers to it as composed by the Aṇiyiyal Udayar. So it seems that there was a first stage, and that first stage is interesting in itself. And of course, before that first stage of a treatise having 28 alankara, we have a Tolkappiyam. So we would also have to explore the root of Aṇiyiyal in the Tolkappiyam. But anyhow, this small presentation was based on Beschi. So the logical thing when one does archaeology is to have a precise stratigraphy and to examine separately each point of time. So the examination I've made of Beschi is of course very incomplete at this stage because Sadura Gallery is not enough. We have also to examine the Tamiḻ Vilakam. Here is a sutra from the Tamiḻ Vilakam, in which you have rhetorical figures, Parulani, and here we have a list of 30 Araim, and this is Parulani. But before that, you have another section in which you have Solani, and you also have 30. So if we want to have a full figure of the group of information and element which was transmitted by Beschi, you have to go in the whole section, any section of the Tamiḻ Vilakam. But that's not all. You also have to, as I said here, Beschi composed in Tamil, but he also wrote in Latin. So he's the first to give translation to some of these things. So here you can see explanation in Latin about Uruvakam. Aec figura quoque et similitudinis species. So somehow the Uruvakam is related to the Uvamei. It's one upper level, and of course we cannot go into those explanations. But as you can see, he was one of the first Westerners to explain these things in a Western language, if we consider Latin as a Western language, when it was the lingua franca of science at that time. So before people in the 19th century tried to explain in English what was in Sanskrit treaties, there were people who were in the 18th century already trying to explain some element of information which were related to those, but they were basing their explanation on the Tamil text. So if we want to have a really faithful history of all those ideas, we have to go back to patient stratigraphy. But of course, this is a long program, so I hope some of you will go into this direction. I try to go on digging, and thank you for your attention. Nandri Vanakkam.
Jean-Luc, can you unshare so that we can have a discussion?
Yes.
As far as I can see, there are 4 minutes left. So who would like to pose a question?
Yeah, Jean-Luc, actually, may I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Yes, but I actually have a question not directly related to your talk, but rather to Beschi. So, but
yes,
probably you can help me. I have a problem with Beschi. I absolutely love his Paramartha Guru Kadehal, and I read them with, or at least, well, something is ascribed to Beschi, but probably Beschi is Paramartha Guru Kadehal, and I always read them with intermediate students. But these Kadehal function as a folklore text in the sense that what I find is the text somehow adapted for the use of Tamil school students or whatever. So I never found a reliable edition of what actually Beschi wrote in Paramartha Guru Kadehal, because what I read is definitely a text adapted by some modern teachers or editors to fit the needs of the Tamil school students. Did you happen to, if you study Beschi, did you happen to come across a reliable edition of Paramartha Guru Kadehal?
I must say I've tried to read many texts of Beschi. His Kolun Tamil grammar, his Saint Tamil grammar, his Taṇṭiyalaṅkāram, his Clavis, his Tamiļ, his Sadhu Ragaradi. And I've never tried to read the Paramartha Guru Vinkale because somehow I'm not really attracted to it.
Okay.
So I've read a few pages. I imagine people could find it amusing, but I myself did not really find it very amusing. So I did not try to go deep into it.
Okay.
You should rather ask Margarita or other people, or maybe here somebody can answer, but not me.
Okay. Thank you. Maybe. Thank you.
Well, I have a question for Jean-Luc. Jean-Luc, what do you think is Beschi's direct source for going to 35?
Well, he thought that the Taṇṭiyalaṅkāram was more prestigious.
But did he think of the Sanskrit Taṇṭiyalaṅkāram or did he think of the Tamil Taṇṭiyalaṅkāram?
Well, Beschi was first of all the Tamil scholar. How much Sanskrit Beschi knew, I have no idea. Whether Beschi was capable of reading the Chevillard J.L, I doubt, but who knows? And whether the nobili before him had tried to read the Chevillard J.L, who knows? Maybe, maybe not. So in my opinion, Beschi read the Taṇṭiyalaṅkāram, the Tamil one.